Welcome back to the weekly rundown. Let's get to the receivers. London, I just mentioned off air that I went kind of obvious in the first half of this week's show. I'm not going to be so obvious here. I'm going to go with a Peyton
You're
Manning
always
receiver.
obvious.
I'm going to go with a Peyton Manning receiver to start off. How about that? I
Okay.
know narratives. I don't know if you believe in them, that that narratives are a thing, that there's a story that's meant to be written. But if there is one, it's that Peyton Manning's coming back as a starter, and this is kind of his goodbye tour, kind of like Kobe Bryant in the NBA. And it's time for him to succeed. Pittsburgh's pass defense has basically been susceptible all season, and Emmanuel Sanders draws an individual matchup against Antoine Blake, who, as you know, has been beat like an absolute drum all season. Has kind of been the reason that their pass defense is struggling, or at least part of it. So I think, regardless of price, if I were to take a receiver on Denver, I'm going Sanders over Thomas, and Sanders happens to be the cheaper option this week. So I think he's my guy. I think he catches more passes than Thomas. I think there's a good chance he finds the end zone. The question is, what does Peyton Manning still have left in that arm? And I'm willing to give that a shot in a week with only 4 games. And my second option, and you mentioned Aaron Rodgers was sacked a lot the first time, but I still think you need a receiver from that game. I mean, Rodgers still going to have to throw the ball, and now Devonte Adams, of course, was looking like the best he's ever looked last week, and then he suffers an injury. They say it's not a horrific knee injury, but a knee injury nonetheless, and I don't think he plays this week. So there's going to be more targets for Jared Abbrederis. I mean, Cobb probably steps up, but I like James Jones again, who has been targeted a whole lot down the stretch, and we know that when it comes down to it, Rodgers is going to look to him in the goal line. He scored 8 touchdowns this season, but really, his targets have been up to double digits almost every week the last few, and he's only 9,100 on FantasyDraft, so I like him yet again. Hopefully, avoiding the Patrick Peterson matchup. I think Cobb gets a lot of that, and that leaves some room open for James Jones. Who do you like this week?
You mentioned playing players against the Green Bay Packers defense. I'm going to go along that same line, and I'm going to play Michael Floyd, the wide receiver for the Arizona Cardinals. And I know it's kind of tough to figure out, okay, week in and week out, which one of the Cardinals receivers will be the go-to guy because each week it could be Larry Fitzgerald one week, Floyd another week, Brown this week. So you just don't know who's going to be the guy that gets the bulk of the catches. But I look back to the first time they got together in Week 16. Michael Floyd was the guy, 6 receptions, 111 yards. So he is the guy that I like even in the second matchup against the Green Bay Packers. I told you I got Carson Palmer as my quarterback, so he has to throw the football to somebody. Michael Floyd is my guy that I like. And just for sake, if Big Ben is able to kind of feel good on Sunday, maybe you look at playing Martavis Bryant. I'm just kind of concerned about Ben's arm and his shoulder and how far he'll be able to throw the football. I'm not sure if Antonio Brown is going to be able to play. He's dealing with a concussion, still in the concussion protocol. But if not, Martavis Bryant may be a guy that you say you take a chance on.
Yeah, I'm with you. I actually wrote about Larry Fitzgerald as a guy to fade this week because kind of down the stretch he faded a little bit, and John Brown and Michael Floyd were every bit as good, and they're cheaper. I mean, he caught more than
Right.
6 passes, or six. I actually think he caught 6 passes once in his final 4 weeks, where Floyd and Brown were still kind of their consistent double digit to upper, to almost 20 fantasy point production. And I think that, again, Fitzgerald will have the toughest individual matchup. And I agree with you. I think Floyd and Brown are the guys to use there because Fitzgerald's just overpriced like he's a true number one, and he hasn't really been. It's kind of a three-way split for number one, really two-way split between Floyd and Fitzgerald. So I agree with you. Let's move on to the tight end position. I'm going with a guy who I'm absolutely in love with this week. I know Gronkowski plays, I know Olsen plays, but I think Travis Kelsey is the guy this week. Without Jeremy Maclin, I think in the playoffs, Andy Reid has no option whatsoever. He doesn't have Jamal Charles anymore. He's got a backfield split, so he has absolutely no choice but to throw the ball to Travis Kelsey, which he did last week. 8 receptions for over 120 yards, and basically, I think he's going to be the highest scoring tight end of the week, and he only costs you 9,600. I think he's a talent pretty much comparable to Rob Gronkowski. They just don't use him, and they don't have a quarterback that relies on him as much as they really should. But I love Travis Kelce as a player, and I think the playoffs is his time. So that's who I'm taking this week. Who do you like?
You realize Kelsey's going against Bill Belichick's Patriots defense, and
I
and
do.
Belichick is known to take out the number one option. I'm just throwing that out there a little bit, but hey, you're the expert. I'm gonna let you go with Kelsey, and he quite well could have a big game. I like Greg Olsen at the tight end position. We know he's Cam's go-to guy, and regardless of the matchups that he's faced, whether he's gotten all the attention or not from the defense, he's been able to produce. He had a big ball game the first time they played against the Seahawks out of Seattle. 7 receptions, 131 yards, and a touchdown. I don't know that he'll get 131 yards, but it wouldn't be far fetched for Olsen to get close to 100 yards receiving. So he's my guy at the tight end position.
Well, yeah, and it's funny you mentioned the number one option because my friends and I have debated that down the stretch. I know against the Titans, Delaney Walker got his a few weeks ago. I know against what was it, the Jets? I think both Decker and Marshall scored, and it was the final week against the Dolphins. I'm pretty sure Landry had himself a day. So I think number one options against the Patriots have been kind of overblown this season as they've started to kind of get theirs. So I like
uh,
Kelsey, but we'll see in the playoffs. It becomes a different story. Let's go to the defense. You kind of already made my case for me earlier. The last time they faced off against each other, Arizona defense against Aaron Rodgers sacked him a whole bunch of times. The Packers offense really to me just isn't a force anymore. They put up 35 points last week, but Rodgers still only threw for just over 200 yards and 2 touchdowns. Not a great completion percentage. He was below 60, and it took both the backs scoring in order for them to reach that. I don't think that happens this week. I think they get to him, so I like Arizona defense. Who do you like?
I like the number one defense in the National Football League, man. The Denver Broncos at home. I know if everything was normal with the Pittsburgh Steelers offense, Big Ben was healthy, Antonio Brown was healthy, then you would say no, don't play the Denver Broncos. But Big Ben is not healthy, and Antonio Brown is not healthy, so gives me confidence in going out and playing the Denver Broncos defense against the Pittsburgh Steelers. I just don't know how Ben is going to feel once the game gets going, even prior to the game, how far he'll be able to throw the football, what type of velocity he'll have on the ball, and no Antonio Brown possibly in that ball game. So those are all reasons to like the Denver Broncos defense in this ball game.
That's definitely true. I would warn people not to look back at Ben Roethlisberger's 380-yard game against them and think that he's going to torch them again because it's a whole different ball game now, and they actually have
Right.
tape from that game to look at to see how he beat them. And if there's no Antonio Brown, it's a whole different game. So please make sure you take that into consideration. Let's move on to the questions because we got some good ones this week, and I got a good one for you. But let's start off with
Okay.
one from Truck 1223. He asks, I've asked other experts, London, and most say I'm crazy because I'm playing both Denver running backs in daily fantasy this week. Do you agree with that strategy? Yes or no against the Pittsburgh Steelers?
Ah man, Pittsburgh's been pretty stout against running backs this year. You saw what they did to the Bengals and Giovanni Bernard and Jeremy Hill this last ball game. So I wouldn't I wouldn't want to play both of them against them. That's just me. But you figure if the running game for Denver can continue to be effective like it has the last 4 or 5 ball games of the year, then both those guys have contributed. So hey, go for it.
So there you go. London doesn't believe in the Peyton Manning effect to a backfield, but I don't think it's quite as powerful as it used to be. All right, user Josh3302 asks you, London, how many Powerball tickets will you be buying, and how many do you recommend that other people buy? With it up to I think it's 1.3 billion.
Um, I want to buy several, and I would advise other people not to buy any. So to increase my odds.
There, there you go. There you go. So even London's looking at that 1.3 billion and seeing, I don't know, maybe a big Shark Tank you can get in your backyard or something like that that you don't already
Yes.
have. And here's my final question: Luke Kuechly today or London Fletcher in his prime? Who's the better linebacker?
Hey man, Luke Kuechly's a great football player. You know, he's able to do a lot of great things. 6'3", very instinctive. But I'm taking me. I'm taking me all day, every day. You know, you might have to go pull up some YouTube video of old .com, man. Back in my St. Louis Rams days, man. Speaking of which, sad to see the Rams leaving St. Louis, headed out to L.A.
Yeah, yeah, I've got some friends from St. Louis. They're not happy. If you haven't seen on Yelp, there are some reviews of the St. Louis Rams. They're pretty funny. I'd go ahead and check those out. But until next time, I'm Ricky Sanders with London Fletcher, formerly of the St. Louis Rams, who are now a shrine in history, and we're out.